The longer that I think about the Final Fantasy VII Remake games, the more I find that Aerith is the most interesting character within them. She is really at the center of all the weird stuff that goes on in these games, and I think that kind of makes sense, because Aerith is not human. Well, not fully human at least. She's half Cetra, and thus she relates to the world of Final Fantasy VII in a fundamentally different way when compared with other characters. Aerith is also not our point of view character, so we do not experience the events of these games through her eyes. We only see her activities as an outsider, from Cloud's perspective. So much of her unique relationship with the world is actually walled off to us. This means that most of Aerith's activities are shown to us, but not explained to us. So we have to explain her actions without having that insider information. And thus Aerith demands that we interpret her. In this video, I want to show you how Aerith requires us to interpret her. And I really want to focus on Chapter 12 of FF7 Remake. I also want to talk a little bit about the ending of Rebirth. And to do so, I want to talk about hermeneutics. That is, the skill of interpreting a piece of media. Because I see so many people that love these games, and they come up with all kinds of theories about them. And some people have these really wild, detached ideas that come from seemingly nowhere. And to be honest, I kind of love it. But I also want to provide some basic information, just so that anyone who wants to make a good theory about the games that they enjoy has some material to work with. And so before we get into talking about hermeneutics, I want to present to you this following scene, and I would like you to keep in mind the following question. How does Aerith actually know about Marlene ahead of time in this scene?
I'm sorry. I can't stay here. I have to help them.
Go. Follow your heart.
Aerith. There's a bar in the center of town, 7th Heaven. I need you to...
Get Marlene to safety, right? It's okay. I'll find her.
Huh? Can you take her to the bar for me, Wedge?
Consider it done. Now get up there and kick Shinra's ass. Come on. 7th Heaven is this way.
Wedge, wait!
Basically, every piece of media and every text has a surface level. That is, its narrative, its words, its sentences. And it's the basic idea that you get from just reading it. So without putting in any effort, you can come away from any piece of media with a basic understanding of what is going on. But if we explore media, we will discover that most stories and texts have something deeper, something not easily conveyed by the story or narrative itself, something that is hard to communicate in tangible ways. Hermeneutics is the act of uncovering that deeper level of a text by means of reading its surface level. So before we move onwards, I will say the following. Hermeneutics is a very ancient tradition. I can only use works that I'm familiar with, so I'm using a scholar, Frances M. Young, and her work, Biblical Exegesis and the Formation of Christian Culture. Because as it turns out, in late antiquity, Christians debate over the method of hermeneutics quite often. And Frances is a great scholar, but to remind you, we're going to be building towards Final Fantasy VII, so if this isn't your cup of tea, just please bear with me. For people in late antiquity, there are generally two kinds of ways of finding a deeper meaning of a text. The first is to study what is called the rhetorical aspects of the text to find its deeper meaning in a way that mirrors the narrative. The second approach uses the language of a text as a collection of symbols so that they can cross-reference the text with already established ideas. These can be categorized as a literary versus an allegorical reading. The literary way of interpreting a text includes the following activities. You explore the subject matter and what's called the lexical analysis, which form the hypothesis of a text. You explore the details of the text in a summary, point by point. You comment on alternative readings, correct punctuation, and the proper construction of sentences, along with any translation or etymological issues. And you explain foreign or obscure words. You also explain the metaphors and the figures of speech, along with its plot. Along with these, you compare the text with itself, and you compare it with other similar texts. And you can also provide background material that would help explain the text. The conclusions that you make about the deeper meaning of a text will join alongside the narrative of the text to form an argumentative coherence. So your interpretation would be grounded in the narrative itself, tied to it like a lifeline. And as Francis Young writes, the interpreter of a text attends to the wording and story of a text, probing the narrative, and through insight and elevation, perceives the moral and spiritual import built into the text's wording and content. Meanwhile, an allegorical approach to interpreting a text will treat the word as a symbol or a token, arbitrarily referring to the other realities by application of a code, so it destroys the narrative or surface coherence of the text. So sometimes allegory is a way of speaking one message to an in-group who gets what the symbols mean, while speaking past others who are not part of the group. In order for an allegory to really work, you need to know how to relate the symbols to their code. Because without that, you are simply destroying the text and replacing it with a bunch of symbols. And so allegory at its worst does not allow the text to be itself. It actually can't let the text speak for itself. It has to be manipulated and regenerated to fit the interpretation that is imposed upon it by the symbols in the code. When an allegory is explained and its symbols are made known, it becomes more of a form of a metaphor, or some other kind of literary technique of that kind in a non-literal way. So thanks for bearing with me on this, but okay, what does this have to do with Final Fantasy VII? People don't just claim to use allegory these days, so what's the deal? And it's true that we don't call it allegory, but often we interpret texts and video games according to a pre-selected set of ideas. Or to say it another way, we understand our media according to our own fan theories. Here is an example. Upon the release of Final Fantasy VII Remake, Max Dude went on the Easy Allies podcast. It represents an early influence upon many of people's theories about this game. In it, Max promotes different levels to the story, level 1, level 2, level 3, so on and so forth, and they involve things like Aerith and Sephiroth coming from the future, or the story being a sequel. And eventually the term Omni-Aerith comes from Max Dude, I don't think it's from that video specifically. But these are ideas that remain huge influences on how people interpret these games. And this isn't to blame Max because I love all his videos, and I think he's done a great job for the Final Fantasy VII Remake project in terms of fostering a community. But when you take these ideas as canon, and then use them to interpret the games to reinforce that canon, you are engaging in an allegorical-like interpretation of the games. And so Aerith becomes interpreted according to a developed theory of Omni-Aerith. Her scenes and her actions are treated as signs, or symbols or tokens that showcase this theory. So you can have people who insert Omni-Aerith into almost any scene they want. So this is some of the practical outplaying of studying hermeneutics, where you can evaluate theory crafting. Okay, but here's a twist. Allegorical readings of a text and literary readings of a text are not irreconcilable enemies. They are simply different steps in a cycle of reading. When you examine the literary aspects of a text, it will lead to the formation of ideas about the text. Those ideas are then used to help us understand it the next time we read it or engage with it. Because sometimes language and a character's actions actually do denote something more than what is presented in the moment. And especially in a video game, there are many ways of conveying meaning through visuals and through audio that, say, a novel just cannot do. Interpreting a text leads to theories and ideas, which then leads us to reread a text, which should lead us to re-theorizing the text. And the cycle continues as long as you want it to. Allegorical readings, or fan theories about a piece of media, should always remember this though. Interpretation isn't magic, and the text is really the authority, not the theory, and the theory must test itself against the text and prove itself by the text. If a theory detached from the text, from the narrative, from the story, it exists as an isolated bubble, and that is where the harm comes from. Okay, let's return to Aerith. When we last left her, she was at the base of the plate, and she knows who Marlene is. Well, how? Is it an example of Aerith knowing the future? Well, no. The game provides us with enough details for us to understand that Aerith pieces together who Marlene is over the previous few chapters. We have spent the past 4 chapters with Aerith, and through that time we have seen her characterized in 3 ways. She takes initiative, she is emotionally intelligent, and she can talk to spirits. So number 1, Aerith takes initiative. She likes to act first, and she is aggressively friendly. Look at how she forces Cloud to go save Tifa, how she persuades Cloud to wear a dress, and most importantly for this, how she interacts with Tifa for the first time. Aerith takes action first, and she does not hesitate to state her mind.
Hey, Tifa. How you doing?
Okay.
Oh, right. I'm Aerith, a friend of Cloud's. We were worried and thought we'd come help you out.
Thanks.
Cut the chatter.
Number 2, Aerith is emotionally intelligent. She sees that Tifa is worried about the plate falling, and if you look at how Aerith interacts with Tifa in the sewers, you will find that she is deeply aware of Tifa's worry, and Aerith goes out of her way to encourage Tifa and to help her stay on track.
Yeah. I hope you're right.
How about this then? Think of something fun. After saving Sector 7, you're gonna...
I'm gonna go shopping. Topside. I'll buy stuff for the bar, decorations, coasters.
Can I come?
You'd better.
Then it's a date.
Cloud can carry all our stuff.
She will actually do this later on in Chapter 17. When we use the PNS machine to switch to Aerith and Tifa, Aerith immediately asks Tifa about her own state. Are you doing well?
But what about you, Tifa? How are you holding up?
Huh? Oh, I'm fine.
And the thing is, Aerith and Tifa are natural friends. They hit it off immediately. If you pay close attention, you will notice that Tifa easily gets lost in Aerith's pace. Compare how Tifa acts prior to meeting Aerith to the moments that she spends with her, such as when they dress up as Shinra soldiers in Junon. So there's obvious friendship there, and it is also obvious that Aerith cares for Tifa and wants to help her. So part 3. The train graveyard is a really interesting chapter, and in it we see Aerith communicating with spirits. It's like the main focus of the chapter. Even when they are invisible to Cloud and Tifa, Aerith can see them and talk with them.
I found you!
She even talks with the ghost boss.
That was fun. All this time, you were waiting for someone to come and play with you.
And after beating him, we exit the building and we see something very interesting. Tifa sees a vision of Marlene. She yells out her name and has a flashback to the bar. Now, of course Aerith doesn't see this flashback, but Tifa is having this vision right in front of Aerith, and Marlene appears as a specter. So maybe Aerith sees something, because she has a special relationship with spirits, but at the very least she knows Marlene's name from this encounter. Soon we leave the graveyard, fight another boss, and we are here at this plate's pillar. So we have all the necessary ingredients for understanding this moment that only happens a few minutes after Tifa's vision. You may have forgotten that because of how long it is to actually get there in gameplay, but it's only a few minutes later. Aerith, who takes initiative, who is friendly and who is caring, who has been paying attention to Tifa's emotional state, who witnesses the vision of Marlene, is now seeing Tifa make a choice. Tifa is deciding to go up the pillar and help Cloud and Avalanche, but by doing so she is forsaking Marlene. So she turns to Aerith for a favor, and we see Aerith in this scene putting everything together, and she says, "To find Marlene, right?" And notice, she can figure out Marlene, but she doesn't know where the bar is. It's because she deduces this answer based on the character traits that have been told to us, but not because she has received some future knowledge. But here is where we can introduce a twist, and we shouldn't throw out all our theories just yet. Because immediately after, Aerith and Wedge run into the Shinra troopers. Unlike Aerith's knowledge of Marlene, the game does not show us the reasons why Aerith thinks the plate will fall. We see her encouraging Tifa, but we never see Aerith promising a good outcome. Aerith tells Wedge to act with no regret in this moment, but she already believes that the plate falling is set in stone. And it's so interesting to me. Aerith always wants to empower others, but she sits alongside that her own fatalism, and she holds those two things in tension. She believes the plate will fall. But right here, right now, we have to act with no regrets. And I think this leads us into another characterization of Aerith. She keeps secrets. In Chapter 8, she begins to theorize about the Whispers, but cuts herself off.
What are they?
I think... Actually... I don't know. Let's just go.
She doesn't tell us why the Turks are after her. She doesn't tell us she's a Cetran. She doesn't even tell Zack any of this. And even when Aerith gives exposition, it's only through veiled comments. In Chapter 17 and Chapter 18, she hints that there's a greater danger than Shinra, but she doesn't explain Jenova. Even when we face Jenova down in the President's room, she just says this vague line of, "It's the source of everything."
This is...
The source of everything.
We also see her do this in Rebirth. At Billy's Chocobo Ranch, Chloe asks about Chocobo Sam, and Aerith stops Cloud from sharing too much information. It is obvious that Aerith knows way more than what she lets on, but she is so reluctant to speak openly about anything. Even at the end of Rebirth, she beats around the bush with Cloud and refuses to say anything with clarity. And here with Wedge, she must know more about this situation than what she says. And Wedge, I think, picks up on that. But even then, Aerith just deflects and turns his attention to what he can do at this moment right now. So where does Aerith's fatalism come from? In the Temple of the Ancients, the Cetra say they were abandoned by fate. Does this also apply to Aerith? Is she bound by her Cetran blood to a fate that she wants to avoid, but cannot? Is her fatalism derived from her knowledge of the future, or is it derived from her unique relationship with the Lifestream and the planet? I don't know if we have the answers for that, which is why theory crafting is so much fun. But we're not done yet either, because we have another scene to look at. Aerith and Wedge part ways, and after pressing through the fleeing crowds, she ends up at 7th Heaven and she meets Marlene. This is a pretty famous exchange, so Marlene sees a vision with all the indicators of the Lifestream, and we see this repeated with Nanaki, so it's obvious something's going on. And Nanaki says in Rebirth that in Midgar he felt like Aerith and him could see the future, so there is some future knowledge going on. But Aerith only engages in this activity when she has the white materia. Without it, she doesn't do these kinds of activities in Rebirth. And when we see Marlene in Rebirth, she seems to have this understanding that Aerith is going to die. So did Marlene get a vision of Aerith's death here in the bar? But how would that encourage her? It's not too clear at this moment what exactly Marlene sees, but the effect that it makes her more courageous and step out to save herself is probably more important than the contents of the vision. Aerith is a Cetra, and she can communicate with the Lifestream. So is this ability connected with the white materia? Is it a typical Cetran ability? So is what she's doing with Marlene just something any Cetra could do with anyone else? Are they mediators of the Lifestream, so to speak? We don't really know the extent of the Cetra's ability. So we could say this is an example of Omni-Aerith working, or we could say that this is just something that is due to Aerith's Cetran heritage. And thus we have 3 different examples of Aerith interacting with people that draws upon 3 different parts of her character, and this makes her very complex as a person to try and interpret. In the last chapter of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, Cloud goes on quite the adventure. He tours the Sector 5 slums with Aerith before being kicked out of that world and talking with Sephiroth in the Lifestream before returning to his own world. And when Cloud returns, we see a time-lapse of the events after he fell from the Temple of the Ancients. Notice this, Cloud is unconscious. Barret has to carry him, and when Cloud wakes up in the forest, Barret says, "It must have been some dream."
Must have been some dream you were having, judging by the way your eyes were twitching.
Don't know if I'd call it a dream.
Either way, something happened to you, didn't it?
Yeah. Got sent to another world. Apparently, there's at least a few more than one.
Is that right?
Cloud's reply suggests that his lifestream vision occurs simultaneously with Barrett carrying his body from the Temple of the Ancients to the forest. And if we take that assumption, let's look again, because we will see in Cloud's time-lapse that Aerith is different. She is able to get up, talk to the group, and even leave on her own. But she should be in the lifestream world with Cloud, where presumably Sephiroth kills her. So how is Aerith operating in the base world, or the real world, and the lifestream at the same time? So how can she do this when Cloud cannot? Actually, Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is not the first time we see this kind of thing happen. In Aerith's resolution scene in FF7 Remake, Cloud meets Aerith in a dream. This Aerith seems different to the one in-game who is in the Shinra building, and more like the Aerith we meet at the end of Rebirth. How is Aerith in two places at the same time? So I'll want to try and explain that a little bit, but let me take a bit of a detour, because this is also very interesting. I only recently noticed the following detail. At the end of Rebirth, our party fights Jenova after Sephiroth kills Aerith. We fight and beat Jenova, and then Cloud is sent to the Edge of Creation. There he is reunited with Zack and they beat Sephiroth. And then we return to the rest of the party, but if you look closely, Cloud is actually missing. This means that the Edge of Creation is not in Cloud's head. It is a spatially separate location, and Cloud is actually transported there, and he is no longer with the party. So the Edge of Creation is someplace in the lifestream. Sephiroth can get there, Zack gets there, Cloud gets there, and Aerith can get there. And it is very interesting that it seems to be Omni-Aerith who is the one to arrive there, so she can be killed in one lifestream world and still appear at the Edge of Creation. This also means that at the end of Remake, Cloud spatially leaves the rest of the group behind to go to the Edge of Creation, and at the beginning of Rebirth, we see the rest of the party gravely injured without Cloud there. So I think Cloud leaving to the Edge of Creation explains why that happens. So how are Omni-Aerith and Aerith connected? Well, probably through the white materia. That seems to be the simplest answer. Aerith has possession of the white materia in Remake, so her ability to interface with the lifestream is fueled by it. But she lacks the white materia in Rebirth for most of the game, and she does not engage in these same kind of activities. Until, near the end of the game, she reconnects with the lifestream at the Temple of the Ancients. She still doesn't have the white materia, but at the temple she is taught how to interact with the lifestream without it. And at the very end, there seems to be an overlap between Aerith and Omni-Aerith when they are talking with Sephiroth.
What do you mean?
My fragmented mother, these errant worlds, all shall be one again.
The reunion.
All made whole forever.
There's no such thing as forever.
But there will be.
Only after the temple does Aerith repossess the white materia and head to the Forgotten Capital. During her death scene, we see two different versions of Aerith, one who is alive and one who is dead. And in the final scene, Aerith seems to persist with the party after her demise. So, maybe it's the white materia that connects the two. But how? Well, I don't know. I suspect that it has something to do with the nature of the white materia, and materia in general. It's a precious materia among the Cetra. Does it store their memories or their desires? Is Omni-Aerith an expression of the white materia? But I think I can add one thing to the discussion. Aerith's essence lives simultaneously in the physical world and in the lifestream. Or, her soul might be constructed in a hypostatic union. So obviously Aerith is the most spiritual character, and the place that she loves the most is a church. So let me use one citation from a church writer to explain this. Athanasius of Alexandria has a work on Jesus called On the Incarnation, and in it he explains an idea that would later go on to be called the hypostatic union. Athanasius says the following: "The Word was not hedged in by his body, nor did his presence in the body prevent his being present elsewhere as well. When he moved his body, he did not cease also to direct the universe by his mind and might. No, the marvelous truth is, that being made the Word, so far from being himself contained by anything, he actually contains all things himself." Now Athanasius goes on to talk more and more about that, but I think the idea is stated pretty simply. Aerith is present in her physical body, and she is present throughout the lifestream, and this is a trait of a hypostatic union. And this theory fits with what we see in-game. Omni-Aerith sees herself as continuous with the Aerith we know in person, both in the resolution scene and at the end of Rebirth. And after Aerith dies in the livestream, she still lives. After Aerith dies in person, she still lives. So maybe some part of Aerith's soul lives on in the white materia, or her essence just continues on in the livestream. And I think all of this is explained along the lines of her unique relationship with the livestream and the world around her due to her being Saturn. So to end the video, and thank you for staying with me this entire time, I want to remind you of something. In the original Final Fantasy VII, Aerith dies, but her spirit continues to live on. She helps us stop Meteor, and she continues to guide souls back into the livestream. So the fact that Aerith's soul is constructed in such a way where she can do this makes perfect sense. And actually, Aerith and Sephiroth are really interesting foils, because Sephiroth dies, his soul lives on in the livestream, connected to Jenova, or just because of his will, and then he presents himself through living bodies. And eventually he regains his own body and returns to being a living human. Meanwhile, Aerith starts off as a person, and we watch her die, and she lives on in the livestream. And yet at the end of the original Final Fantasy VII, it is Aerith, not Sephiroth, who prevails. And as we head into part 3, it's going to recapture this same progression. So I'm sure we'll see more of Aerith, and we'll get some more answers. But until then, thanks for watching.